looked upon him as greater even than Providence. Thus, she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of the celestial stages, was, seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of the celestial stages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The wife is expected to be the same category as the husband. She must be prepared to follow the principles of the husband, and then there will be happy life. If the husband is a devotee and the wife is materialistic, there cannot be any peace in the home. The wife must see the tendencies of the husband and must be prepared to follow him. From Mahabharata, we learn that when Gandhari understood that her would-be husband, Dhritarashtra, was blind, she immediately began to practice blindness herself. Thus, she covered her eyes and played the part of a blind woman. She decided that since her husband was blind, she must also act like a blind woman. Otherwise, she would be proud of her eyes, and her husband would be seen as inferior. Okay. The word samanuvrata indicates that it is the duty of a wife to adopt the special circumstances in which the husband is situated. Of course, if the husband is a great devotee as Kardama Muni, then a very good result accrues from following him. But even if the husband is not a great devotee, like Kardama Muni, it is the wife's duty to adapt herself according to his mentality. That makes married life very happy. It is also mentioned herein that by following the strict vows of a chaste woman, Princess Devahuti became very skinny, and therefore her husband became compassionate. He knew that she was the daughter of a great king, and yet was serving him just like an ordinary woman. She was reduced to health by such activities, and he became compassionate and addressed her as follows. Kardama Muni said, O respectful daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, today I am very pleased with you for your great devotion and most excellent loving service. Since the body is so dear to embodied beings, I am astonished that you have neglected your own body to use it on my behalf. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is indicated here that one's body is very dear. Yet Devahuti was so faithful to her husband that not only did she serve him with great devotion, service, and respect, but she did not even care for her own health. That is called selfless service. It appears that Devahuti had no sense pleasure, even with her husband. Otherwise, she would not have deteriorated in health. Acting to facilitate Kardama Muni's engagement in spiritual elevation, she continually assisted him, not caring for bodily comfort. It is the duty of a faithful and chaste wife to help her husband in every respect, especially when the husband is engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is, in this case, the husband also amply rewarded the wife. This is not to be expected by a woman who is the wife of an ordinary person. interesting last sentence here. Of course, Devahuti completely dedicated herself to serving Kardama Muni, not caring for bodily comfort. Well, if you serve without caring for bodily comfort, what happens? It you can get unnecessarily sick and get emaciated, losing a lot of weight and things like that. So Devahuti uh, had no sense of pleasure, even with her husband. Otherwise, she would not have deteriorated in health. She continually assisted him, not caring for bodily comfort. That's not really so good. It does show, however, how dedicated Devahuti was to her husband. But the deterioration of her health is not going to be helpful in the long run. So let's see what happens. Um, she continually assisted her husband, not caring for bodily comfort. It is the duty of a faithful and chaste wife to help her husband in every respect, especially when the husband is engaged in Krishna consciousness. In this case, the husband also amply rewarded the wife. This is not to be expected by a woman who is the wife of an ordinary person. Okay, well, ladies do not have to uh, serve their husband in the same way uh, Devahuti was serving her husband. But that type of service doesn't last forever. So let's see what's going to happen. Text number 7. Gardama Muni continued, I have achieved the blessings of the Lord in discharging my own religious life of austerity, meditation, and Krishna consciousness. Although you have not yet experienced these achievements, which are free from fear and lamentation, I shall offer them all to you because you are engaged in my service. Now just look at them. I am giving you the transcendental vision to see how nice they are. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Devahuti engaged only in the service of Kardama Muni. She was not supposed to be so advanced in austerity, ecstasy, meditation, or Krishna consciousness. But imperceptibly, she was sharing her husband's view, which she could see, which she could neither see or experience. Automatically, she achieved these graces of the Lord. What are the graces of the Lord? It is stated here that the graces of the Lord are abhaya, free from fearlessness. In the material world, if someone accumulates $1,000,000, he is always full of fear because he's always thinking, what if the money is lost? But the benediction of the Lord, Bhagavat Prasada, is never to be lost. It is simply to be enjoyed. There is no question of loss. One simply gains and enjoys gaining. Bhagavad Gita also confirms this. When one achieves the grace of the Lord, the result is that sarva dukkani, all distresses are destroyed. When situated in the transcendental position, one is freed from the two kinds of material diseases, hankering and lamentation. This is also in Bhagavad Gita. After devotional life begins, we can achieve the full result of love of God. Love of Krishna is the highest perfection of Bhagavad Prasada, or divine mercy. This transcendental achievement is so greatly valuable that no material happiness can compare to it. Prabodhananda Saraswati said, that if one achieves the grace of Lord Chaitanya, he becomes so great that he does not care a fig, even for the demigod. He thinks of monism as hellish, and for him, the perfection of controlling the senses is as easy as anything. Heavenly pleasures become to him no more than stories. Actually, there is no comparison between material happiness and transcendental happiness. By the grace of Kardama Muni, Devahuti experienced actual realization simply by serving. We get a similar example in the life of Narada Muni. In his previous life, Narada was a maidservant's son, but his mother was engaged in the service of great devotees. He, meaning um, Narada, was a maidservant's son, but his mother was engaged in the service of great devotees. He got the opportunity to serve the devotees, and simply by eating the remnants of their foodstuff and carrying out their orders, he became so elevated that in his next life he became the great personality Narada. For spiritual achievement, the easiest path is to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and to serve him with heart and soul. That is the secret of success, as stated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his 8 stanzas of prayer to the spiritual master. Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasada. By serving or receiving the grace of the spiritual master, one receives the grace of the Supreme Lord. By serving her husband, Kardama Muni, Devahuti shared in his achievement. Similarly, a sincere disciple, simply by serving a bona fide spiritual master, can achieve all the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master simultaneously. Srila Prabhupada, J. Very, very nice purport. And let me just read it again. Kardama Muni continued, I have achieved the blessings of the Lord in discharging my own religious life of austerity, meditation, and Krishna consciousness. Although you have not yet experienced these achievements, which are free from fear and lamentation, I shall offer them all to you because you are engaged in my service. Now, just look at them. I am giving you the transcendental vision to see how nice they are. Okay, so what's going to be emphasized here is that sometimes it's very difficult for women to engage in the same level of renunciation as an exalted devotee like Kardama. Uh, Women usually need certain types of let's say uh, situations uh, that are not so austere as uh, a, a great devotee like Kardama. So, but however, that doesn't say they can't do it. They can do it, but oftentimes they may be, uh, let's say, uh, in so much austerity, just like their husband, that they get very thin. They might even get sick and so forth. Uh, Not all, but it can happen like that when one overstresses themselves. And women always need a certain amount of comfort to feel, let's say, normal in their estimation, and to engage in severe austerity, like someone like Kardama Muni, is going to be very difficult for women. It's not impossible, but it's going to be difficult. Okay, and especially if she's going to have children, and then now she has to take care of the children. She has to take care of her. her husband, and then she has also engaged in severe tapasya as her husband. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, women that naturally expect to have some comfort and the a peaceful, happy type of situation. So the what's going to happen here? We're going to hear very interesting things about Devahuti. So number one is she engaged only in the service of Kardama. She was not supposed to be so advanced in austerity, ecstasy, meditation, or Krishna consciousness, but imperceptibly she was sharing her husband's achievements, which she could neither see nor experience. Automatically, she achieved these graces of the Lord. What are the graces of the Lord? It is stated here that the graces of the Lord are abhaya, free from fearfulness. In the material world, if someone accumulates $1 million, he is always full of fear because he is always thinking, what if the money is lost? But the benediction of the Lord, Bhagavat Prasada, is never to be lost. It is simply to be enjoyed. There is no question of loss. One simply gains and enjoys gaining. Bhagavad Gita also confirms this. When one achieves the grace of the Lord, the result is that Sana Dukkani, I'm sorry, Sarva Dukkani, all distresses are destroyed. When situated in the transcendental position, one is freed from the two kinds of material diseases, hankering and lamentation. This is also stated in Bhagavad Gita. After devotional life begins, we can achieve the full result of love of God. Love of Krishna is the highest perfection of Bhagavat Prasada, or divine mercy. Uh, let's discuss that a little bit. The ultimate goal is to achieve this love of Lord Krishna and to share that love with others. So, therefore, Prabhupada says here, love of Krishna is the highest perfection of Bhagavat Prasada, or divine mercy. This transcendental achievement is so greatly valuable that no material happiness can compare with it. Well, that's a factual statement. And when there is love of Krishna, one naturally engages in all kinds of devotional service and does not feel any discomfort by doing it. In fact, they feel more and more transcendental pleasure by doing it. That's why it talks about love. Love has no limitation of, let's say, uh, of unalloyed devotion. And therefore, uh, one feels tremendous happiness coming closer and closer to Krishna. This transcendental achievement, in other words, this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita. After devotional life begins, we can achieve the full result of love of Godhead. Love of Krishna is the highest perfection of Bhagavat Prasada, or divine mercy. Well, just imagine that one achieves that, they become totally satisfied, even though they might be in difficult situations. Still, they have something that is greater than misery. That's love of Krishna. So therefore, they're not disturbed in any way by the so-called discomforts. And Prabhupada talks about this. He says, "Well, my devotees, my disciples, they, when he was talking to someone, he said, they're sleeping on the floor, and they are." Uh, They have come from very wealthy families, but yet they're living a very austere life, dedicating themselves completely to pleasing Krishna and Guru. So he was actually, uh, let's say, explaining to other people how uh, many of the devotees that he made were coming from wealthy families, and they had given up all that the extravagancy of being wealthy and completely dedicated, waking up early, bathing, all these other things that they were doing, and spending their whole life just trying to preach Krishna consciousness and spread Krishna consciousness, uh, even though they had come from very wealthy families. And however, whatever wealth they had achieved, uh, they were offering it to Krishna. So this is real renunciation. I mean, one thing is to make a lot of money. The next thing is how are you going to use your money? If you use your money in the service of Krishna, that's the correct way. And then you feel greater satisfaction than anything else. So some people who become very rich, they give some part of what they've achieved as far as riches goes to charities and so-called helping people's material life. That's okay. It's not bad, but that does not necessarily solve the problems of the people, nor is it ultimately beneficial for the person. Uh, the real benefit is when a person achieves real love and devotion for Krishna, and they use almost all of their money in the service of Krishna. That becomes very prominent in as far as being engaged in devotional service, and they do great help to others, and at the same time, they're not, let's say, punished by uh, Yamaraj for simply collecting a lot of money and spending it for sense gratification. So this is a question rich people have to ask themselves. Simply hoarding a lot of money is actually sinful. It creates jealousy and anger in the eyes of, let's say, lesser people, people who are less opulence, and it could create resentment. Like, for example, if you study the French Revolution that took place, uh, poor people were really poor, and the rich people were really rich. And at a certain point, when there was the French Revolution, the poor people just went around and started killing the rich people. So why don't you look that up? French Revolution. Yeah. And the rich people didn't give a hoot. They didn't give anything to the poor people. And the poor people eventually revolted and they started killing all the rich people. They have what's called a guillotine. I think that's the pronunciation. Guillotine. It's a very sharp, razor sharp metal thing that's uh, you can rise it to a high position, and then people put their head down in this wooden type of contraption, and they're strapped down, and then they let go of the razor sharp thing that's like 10 feet or 15 feet high, and it crashes down in their neck and it cuts their head off. So that's what they did. They took all the rich people, a lot of the rich people that could, and they guillotined them. They cut their heads off. with this contraption. They were so angry because the rich people just got richer and richer, and the poor people, their life became harder and harder, and eventually they just revolted. What did it say?
Yeah, it said the French Revolution, which began in 1789, was triggered by a combination of social, economic, and political factors. Number one, social inequality. French society,
Social inequality.
yeah,
Okay.
the French society was divided into three estates: the clergy, the first estate, and the nobility, second estate, and the commoners, the third
All
estate.
right. So you have the clergy who were living in a lot of, let's say, extravagancy. And then the
Nobility is the second.
nobility was also living in extravagancy. And the people, the third, they were all poor. Okay.
Okay. So the third estate, comprising the vast majority of the population, bore the brunt of heavy taxation and had little political power, while the first and second estates enjoyed significant privileges. Number two, economic hardship. France was in severe financial trouble due to costly wars, including the support for the American Revolution.
So who dies in costly wars? It's the common people, not the rich people. Uh,
And the extravagant spending by the monarchy. A series of poor harvests in the 1780 led to food shortages and high bread prices, which exacerbated the suffering of the common people. Number three, Enlightenment ideas. Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and
Rousseau.
Rousseau, and then Montesquieu challenged the traditional authority of the monarchy and the church. Their ideas about liberty, equality, and democracy inspired the Third Estate to demand more political power and rights.
The third estate is the common people.
Yeah. Then fourth is the weak leadership. The King Louis XVI was seen as an indecisive and ineffective leader. His inability to manage the financial crisis and his resistance to reforms fueled public dissatisfaction. And finally, the political crisis. The Estates General Assembly, representing the three estates, was convened in 1789 for the first time in over a century to address the financial crisis. However, disputes over representation and voting rights led the Third Estate to break away from and form National Assembly, making the start of a revolution.
Yeah, you see, you if you manage irresponsibly, eventually the people will revolt, and the you know the rich people in France, they didn't care about the poor people. They didn't do hardly did anything to help them. And then the clergy, they were also living in riches. I mean, not maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, and they didn't really care about the financial and uh, you know severity of life of the normal people. So they revolted. They started cutting the heads off of rich people and of some clergy also. So what else does it say?
Uh, Yeah, that's the end of the factors that created the French Revolution. So I was just searching for that. Would you like
Yeah,
me to
yeah.
say something else?
So you see, uh, in Krishna consciousness, as long as there is very nice prasadam and uh, you know the basic needs are established or let's say uh, are being applied in the society, and people won't revolt. So what happens? Prabhupada was always very adamant that there should be nice prasadam for the devotees. He would ask, is the prasadam good for the devotees? Now, prasadam is prasadam, right? But he also wanted to know if the prasadam was good. Uh, and why? Because that's very important. And he said, this is the only sense gratification that devotees can have. And if that's not good, then, they're not going to stay around very long. So, as that's what happened in France. The poor people, they couldn't eventually have good things. They couldn't afford it. And they were being exploited. And they revolted, and they cut the heads off of these rich people, just dragged them down and put them and the guillotine is a very uh, dangerous thing. Like it's a very sharp edged uh, uh, contraption, and they put it up high, and then people have to put their head down on a wooden type of thing that holds them down, and this thing comes down, sharp thing comes down, cuts their head off immediately. It comes down, it's like 10, maybe 15 feet high. And then that sharp blade just comes down. One strike cuts off the head of a person. You imagine how scary that thing is. And then they just took people and guillotined them. They cut their heads off, with this contraption. Why don't you look that up?
What's the spelling?
Guillotine. Uh, oh, oh, I'm not sure. Starts with a G.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I forget how to spell that. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. So you see that the anger of the poor people just, became so much that they actually grabbed these rich people and they cut their heads off, you know.
Yeah, guillotine, right?
Yeah.
Guillotine.
Okay.
So it's a device used for executions, particularly during the French Revolution, where it became a symbol of the reign of terror. It consisted of a tall, upright frame with a heavy angled blade suspended at the top. When the blade was released, it would swiftly drop down and decapitate the person below it.
Oh yeah. It's very scary. Anything else?
It was designed to be quick and efficient method of execution.
It was very efficient. So this it sort of was the result of the fact that the rich people just kept getting richer and richer, and the poor people were exploited more and more to the point where they could hardly earn enough money just to eat. See, if you have, this is why Prabhupada was always concerned that the devotees are having nice prasadam, and he said, well, it's the only such gratification they're having, so it should be good. But if that's not good, then everyone's going to be dissatisfied. And this is what happened in France. The rich people were eating really nice food and then nice clothing, and nice habitations, and the poor people were getting poorer and poorer, and life was harder and harder for them. And they said, "Okay, that's it. We were finished with this. It doesn't matter if they kill us. We're already going to die of starvation." So they revolted and they grabbed these rich people and they cut their heads off with the guillotine. So it was a real wake up for the rich people. So then there's a saying: "Vive caché, vive mieux." In other words, don't show your wealth, but live well. So when you just accommodate a lot, accumulate a lot of money and show it off, eventually there's going to be enviousness. And if you're living in a place where there are a small quantity number of people that are very, very rich, and everybody else is getting poorer and poorer, there's going to be a revolution. And people get so angry that they just grab these rich people and just cut their heads off with the guillotine. That's exactly what happened in France. But did it actually resolve the problem of inequality? No, it didn't. Uh, as soon as they started cutting people's heads off, they had some level of uh, perverted satisfaction, but it didn't solve the problem of being poor. Why don't you read a little bit more, see what,
of the
yeah,
of the French Revolution.
the French Revolution and how long it lasted. It didn't stop until there was more, let's say, equitable distribution of some wealth. I mean, it doesn't mean that everyone's rich, but at least they should have their minimum. And the minimum is bread and wine. If they can't afford bread and wine, they're going to revolt. In France, you always see when they go to in those times when uh, they would have a bottle of wine and they would have a French loaf of bread, right?
Yeah,
The baguette, it's
baguette,
called baguette.
baguette.
It's a long piece uh, of bread, and those two things, okay, life is all right. Uh, but they couldn't even afford that. They couldn't even eat that. So I mean that caused a revolution.
It lasted for about 10 years, 1789 to 1799, and was a period of profound political and social upheaval in France that dramatically reshaped the nation's institutions, government, and society. Here are the key moments and phases in the revolution.
10 years. It's a long time. Go ahead.
The first was the financial crisis and estates debt. France's financial situation had deteriorated due to years of war and extravagant spending. King Louis XVI, facing bankruptcy, was forced to summon the States General in May 1789, a general assembly representing the three estates, the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. The three estates representing the commoners demanded more representation. Yeah, the third estate, representing the commoners, demanded more representation and formed the National Assembly after being locked out of the Estates General. Then the second phase of it is the tennis court oath.
What?
The tennis court oath. So let's read this one. So the locked out of their meeting hall, members of the third estate gathered in a nearby indoor tennis court and swore the tennis court oath, vowing
Tennis court vote.
oath,
What?
O-A-T-H, oath. Basically, they got out of the Estates General and then
Yeah.
they got into the tennis court and then they all took an oath.
Yeah.
What is that they vowed is that they vowed not to disband until they had written a new constitution for France.
Mm.
So this act of defiance marked the first organized opposition to the king's authority. So that's where they decided to completely fight until the constitution is changed. Then the next phase was the storming of the Bastille, that is the July 14th, 1789. The revolutionaries stormed the Bastille prison in Paris, a symbol of royal tyranny. The fall of the be-
Bastille.
Bastille, Bastille became a symbol of revolution and is celebrated annually as Bastille Day in France.
Yeah, it's a big celebration every year.
This event marked the beginning of widespread revolutionary activity across the country. And then fourth phase was the Great Fear, which is the summer of 1789. Following the storming of the Bastille,
Bastille was a prison.
yeah, and rumors of the aristocratic plots led to
Aristocratic what?
plots. Look, they were creating some plots to kind of minimize the revolution. But when they heard that there's some aristocratic plots, then it led to widespread panic and violence in the countryside. This period, known as the Great Fear, saw peasants attacking noble estates and burning feudal records, effectively dismantling the feudal system. Basically, the land ownership, everything.
Mhm.
So the farmers, commoners basically were fighting it everywhere
Mhm.
and burning the records.
Burning what?
The feudal records means like the land records.
Oh, okay.
And then the next phase was the declaration of the rights of man and of the citizen. So the National Assembly, which is all basically the third
Mhm.
uh,
You're poor
class,
people.
the poor people, adapted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which proclaimed the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Now, this is what also inspired the American Revolution against the British, because the British had colonized, parts of what's today is called the United States, not the whole um, body of the United States, but whatever was uh, colonized by the British. And the French Revolution inspired the Americans to revolt against the English. Go ahead.
And it established the fundamental rights of all male citizens and was heavily influenced by Enlightenment ideals. Then the sixth phase of the war or the revolution was that the Women's March on Versailles. In October 1789,
Versailles, gigantic, beautiful building.
building with parks,
Yeah,
the gardens.
it's the name of the city, and it's also the name of the building.
Thousands of women marched from Paris to the royal palace at Versailles
That takes a couple hours.
to demand bread and force the king to move to Paris. The king and his family were brought to Paris, effectively placing them under the control of the revolutionaries. The next phase was
Yeah, they were going to kill them.
the civil constitution of the clergy. The National Assembly passed the civil constitution of the clergy, which brought the Catholic Church under state control.
Yeah, what happened is they seized all the assets of the Catholic Church, and that was a lot. It was shocking to the Catholic Church. Go ahead.
Yeah, so they brought the Catholic Church under state control. The clergy were required to swear allegiance to the revolution, causing a deep division in the French society between the revolutionaries and the devout Catholics. Then the next,
Yeah, because the people revolted. They didn't care a hoot about Christianity anymore. They got really upset, because of the way they were being treated. So, the clergy and the nobility were having a very high level of sense gratification, and the people were just suffering. And they said, okay, that's enough. Now we're going to show them, who's the boss.
the next phase was the flight to Varennes, Varennes.
Where's that word?
Here. Varanus,
Varennes.
Varan,
Yeah.
Varan. So the flight to Varan, the King Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee France in June 1791 to rally support from foreign monarchies. They were captured in Valence and returned to Paris, which led to a decline of the king's popularity and fueled calls for the abolition of the monarchy. The next phase was the establishment of the First French Republic. Amid increasing radicalization, the monarchy was abolished in September 1792, and France was declared a republic. This period saw the rise of Jacobins,
What?
Jacobins,
Okay, go ahead.
a radical political faction at the beginning of the Reign of Terror. So these are the people that I think were actually executing people.
Cutting people's heads off.
Then the next phase was the execution of the Louis XVI. So the King Louis XVI was tried for treason and by the National Convention and executed by guillotine
Yeah.
on January 21st, 1793. His execution marked a turning point in the revolution, leading to a period of intense violence and consolidation of power by radical revolutionaries.
You see how angry people can get
Yeah.
when there's extravagancy amongst rich people and abject the poverty of normal people.
So the next phase was the next 2 years, which is the reign of terror, led by the Committee of Public Safety under the figures like Maximilian Robin Robespierre. The Reign of Terror was a period of mass executions of perceived enemies of the revolution. The guillotine became the symbol of this era, with thousands of people, including Queen Mary Antoinette,
What?
the Queen
Marie Antoinette.
Antoinette, executed. She was also executed. And then finally, the next phase was the
Yes,
fall.
because she said, "Well, let them eat. What is it? I think she said, let them eat bread, something like that." And and then when the normal people heard that, they got really upset.
Yeah. So she's still probably not in reality by then because already these commoners took control of the entire country. So the fall of the Robespierre's increasingly dictatorial rule led to his downfall. On July 27th, 1794, he was arrested and executed the following day. His death marked the end of the Reign of Terror and the beginning of a more moderate phase of the revolution known as Thermidorian reaction.
The what?
The Thermidorian reaction.
Yeah, I don't know what that word means. Anyway, okay.
Thermidorian reaction. So the next phase was the Directory. The Directory was a five-member committee that governed France after the fall of the Robespierre. This period was characterized by corruption, economic hardship, and continued conflict.
It didn't get better; it got worse.
Yeah. The Directory struggled to maintain control and faced opposition from both royalists and radical revolutionaries. The next phase was the rise of the Napoleon Bonaparte. So in November 1799, General Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup, dethrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate with himself as first consul. This event, known as the coup of 1B Brumaire, effectively ended the French Revolution and paved the way for Napoleon's rise to power as the Emperor of France. Then the next phase is the Napoleonic era, which is from 1804 to 1815. Though beyond the revolution itself, the Napoleonic era was directly shaped by the revolution's outcomes. Napoleon instituted many reforms that solidified some revolutionary gains, such as the Napoleonic Code, while also curbing some of the more radical changes. Finally, the legacy of the French Revolution. The French Revolution has had a profound impact on the France and the world, spreading ideas of democracy, nationalism, and human rights. It dismantled the feudal system, weakened the power of the Catholic Church, and inspired the subsequent revolutions across Europe and the Americas. Despite its chaotic and often violent nature, the revolution laid the groundwork for modern France and many democratic ideals that continue to influence global politics.
They burst. They just seized all the properties of the Catholic Church, and of course they cut the heads off a lot of people that were extravagant. Didn't care at all about the common people. But the common people are the majority, right?
Yeah,
So it doesn't matter how strong your army is if the common people revolt. And then some of the soldiers will revolt also. You know, uh, so yeah, it was very dangerous time for rich people, and that's what happens when it's too much uh, wealth in the hands of a few people, and the rest of the people are poor and just struggling to eat. And there's going to be a revolt. And you see what they do in the United States is they try and stop anybody from revolting by giving a lot of free money, especially for the blacks. The blacks revolted also in the United States. At one point, they were shooting and killing in the streets of major cities like Philadelphia and other places. You couldn't even go outside because there were people are being killed, uh, especially white people. So yeah, that's because when there's a large majority of very poor people and a very small number of very rich people, and there's nothing to help the poor people, then they revolt. So then this almost happened in the United States in the 1930s, where there was it was very difficult for people to eat in the United States. There was uh, there was bad weather, and the harvests weren't so good, and there was a collapse of the economy in 1928, I think, in the United States. And it lasted for about 10 years. The only thing that saved the United States from a total revolution was and then the establishment of communism, because in like 1928 to 1940, there was a real, let's say, danger of establishing a communist state. The only thing that saved the country was World War II.
mhm.
Otherwise, uh, the people are ready to just completely destroy all the rich people, and anyway, so uh, there has to be some way that poor people can, be maintained so they don't revolt. So therefore, the United States, which is supposed to be, a capitalist country, uh, dev- uh, developed what you would say, uh, a whole uh, socialist system. Uh, it's still a capitalistic country, but but a lot of things are socialized. That means that there's a lot of freebies given to the to the people. Like the blacks, they revolted in the United States in 1968 with guns. They were shooting in the street and everything. So, of course, they were put down. The movement was called the Black Panthers, and they were gunned down by the United States military. Uh, Normally, the military can't function in the country, but I think at that time, maybe it wasn't the national military, but it was uh, the uh,
National Guard?
huh?
Was it National Guard?
National Guard. Yeah, National Guard started killing people to stop the revolution that was taking place. They mostly were black people. They were called Black Panthers, and so it can happen anywhere when there's a large group of poor people and a small group of very rich people, and the rich people don't make it easy for the poor people, right? So then they started, all this, you know, uh, President Roosevelt and his wife. His wife was a communist, so he insisted, that they established more socialism, and that's what happened in the 1930s. All these programs came out of, just like what do you call it? Uh, I forget the name. Let's look up the 1930s. Uh, and Eleanor Roosevelt. She was like a communist, the wife of the president. And all these social welfare programs started. Whereas before that, they didn't have these so many social welfare programs. So then it was no longer complete capitalism. It was a mixture of capitalism and socialism. And that sort of saved the country from, having a severe revolution. And at the same time, World War II started. So it, changed everything because whenever there's war, there's complete control by the government. All private, let's say, rights are stopped, and the government can do whatever it wants. You know, uh, so uh, if the you know if anyone was protesting against the government, they could be killed. That's how severe the situation became. But because it was a war, most people were not against uh, having the war. 'Cause they didn't want to be, even though their life was difficult, they didn't want to be conquered and by some other country. So what does it say?
Yeah, so in the 1930s, the United States experienced a significant rise in interest in communism,
Yeah.
largely driven by the economic hardships of the Great Depression.
Yes.
Several factors contributed to the growing influence of the communist ideas during this period.
Yes.
First was the Great Depression itself. The stock market crash of the 1929 triggered the Great Depression, leading to widespread unemployment, poverty, and economic instability.
Yeah.
Many Americans became disillusioned with the capitalism, which seemed to have failed them, and began exploring alternative political and economic systems. Communism, with its promises of economic equality and worker rights, became more attractive to those suffering from the effects of the Depression. Next was the Communist Party USA, CPUSA. So the Communist Party USA was founded in 1919 and gained momentum in the 1930s.
Eleanor Roosevelt, the husband, the wife of the husband who was president of the United States, who was voted in twice and three times, and I think four times he got voted in as president. Then when they changed the law that you can only be voted president two
Two
times.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So, but this the Communist Party itself was led by figures like Errol Broder. Uh, the CPUSA achieved actively organized workers, particularly in industries hit hard by the depression, such as steel, textiles, and coal mining. The party's platform included calls for the social welfare programs, unemployment insurance, and worker rights, which resonated with many Americans during this period. Then the New Deal and the left wing influence. This is when President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs, introduced in response to the Depression, aimed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. While the New Deal itself was not communist, it incorporated some ideas that aligned with leftist thinking, such as government intervention in the economy and social welfare programs. Some New Deal programs like Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps were seen as stepping stones towards a more socially equitable society, which aligned with communist ideas.
basically it was all freebies,
Yeah, the top.
giving free money to the people,
Then
which is still going on today.
the next is the labor movements. In 1930s, saw a surge in labor activism with the formation of powerful unions like Congress of the Industrial Organization (CIO). CPUSA played a significant role in organizing labor strikes and advocating for workers' rights. The party's involvement in the labor movement helped to spread communist ideas among American workers.
It looked like in the 1930s, looked like the government was going to change to a communist government. There was a real possibility of that. The only thing that saved them was the war. If it wasn't a war, it would probably, the United States would have become a communist country.
The Popular Front. In 1935, CPUSA adopted the Popular Front strategy, which called for forming alliances with other left wing groups, including socialists, liberals, and progressives, to combat the rise of fascism and support workers' rights. This
Fascism.
fascism, yeah.
Yeah, that was the rise of Hitler's movement.
This strategy led collaborators to mainstream
The
political.
Nazis, the Nazis, because the Nazis were what does Nazi mean? It's the socialist socialist movement as opposed to the communist movement. There's a difference between the two.
Yeah, communism ownership is the state.
Yeah, communism means no. I mean, pure communism is that all the power is given in the hands of the people in general.
Yeah,
That never really happened, but it came close to that. Uh, and and socialist is everything is controlled by the government.
yeah,
Right? Communism, pure communism, everything's controlled by the people. Chaotic. That never really happened, but it came close to that, but it never really fully happened in the United States. The communism. But it
yeah.
looked like it
There,
was going to
there's
happen in the 1930s.
there is a cultural impact. Communist and leftist ideas were also found expression in American culture during the 1930s. Many writers, artists, and intellectuals, disillusioned by the failures of the capitalism, turned to communism or socialism. Figures like John Steinbeck, whose works depicted the struggles of the poor and working class, and Dorothea Lange, a photographer who documented the hardships of the Depression, were influenced by the leftist ideas. The Federal Writers Project and the Federal Theatre Project, part of the New Deal, provided outlets for artists and leftist sympathies. So that's what actually many of the leftist ideas got into the kind of main education and
Yeah,
art and culture of this country.
yeah,
Then finally, the anti-communist backlash. And while communism gained some ground in the 1930s, it also faced significant opposition. The rise of communism in the US led to increased surveillance and repression by the government, including the work of the House Un-American Activities Committee.
yeah. They were trying to put into jail the communists, and many of the people that were being carefully, let's say, vetted were uh, Hollywood stars because they're famous. So if they espouse or if they support communism, like a lot of people will follow them because they're watching their movies. So there was this guy named McCarthy. Look up McCarthy, what he was doing. He 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 claimed that there are too many communists in the government and also in the movie stars. And he started having all of them, investigated. His name was McCarthy, and it scared the heck out of people. And he was like trying to uh, identify all the communists that were in the movie business and in government and everywhere in the country. And he was a hardcore, rightist. Uh, People were afraid of MacArthur.
Yeah, Joseph McCarthy was a US Senator from Wisconsin who became one of the most prominent figures in the anti-communist movement during the early 1950s, a period often referred to as the Second Red Scare,
Second one,
Second Red Scare.
Red Scare. Yeah, the
Although,
fear that the country would become communist.
yeah, although McCarthy's influence peaked after the 1930s, his actions were rooted in the growing anti-communist sentiment that had been building since that time. Here is how McCarthy's influence played out. So first he rose to prominence in 1950 when he delivered a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, claiming to have a list of 205 communists who were working in the US Senate State Department.
It's right. It's right. Completely right.
Although the numbers and the names were never substantiated, this claim tapped into existing fears of communist infiltration in the US government and led to a national hysteria.
Yeah.
And the McCarthyism. The term McCarthyism came to describe the practice of making accusations of subversion or treason without proper evidence. McCarthy used his position as the chairman of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations to conduct aggressive and highly publicized investigations into alleged communist activities within the government.
A lot of those people that were investigated were movie stars.
Impact on American society. McCarthy's influence led to widespread fear and paranoia, resulting in blacklisting many individuals in Hollywood, academia, and
Yeah,
other
you see Hollywood.
were blacklisted, losing their jobs and careers due to accusations of communist sympathies, often based on little or no evidence. Government purges. Thousands of government employees were investigated and many lost their jobs due to alleged ties to communism. The federal loyalty program, initiated by the President Truman in 1947, was intensified under McCarthy's influence, leading to widespread investigations, suppression of dissent, the,
People were afraid.
yeah, the climate of fear stifled political dissent,
Stifled.
stifled political dissent and freedom of speech, as people were afraid of being labeled communists or communist sympathizers. But again, the downfall started in 1954 during the Army McCarthy hearings, where when he accused the US Army of harboring communists. He went to the extreme.
He's right, though. He was right.
The hearings were televised, and McCarthy's bullying tactics and lack of credible evidence were exposed to the public. The turning point came when Army's chief counsel Joseph Welch famously rebuked John McCarthy with the question, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" This moment marked the beginning of the end of the McCarthy's influence.
See how powerful words are.
The time check for us.
Okay, I think we'll stop there. You see, there were a lot of turmoil in the 1930s in the United States. There was turmoil all the time, but it was real serious. It looked at one point that the whole country could turn into a communist country. So what did they do? They passed a whole bunch of laws that were socialistic in the United States. You know, that's when they started the freebies, Social Security. Is it Social Security? So the guarantee that no one will die of starvation. Let's say, that they're going to be helped by the government so that they don't revolt.
Mm.
That's when it started, and it's still continuing today. You know how much money black people get from the government? I mean, you'd be shocked. I mean, white people also get welfare, but black people get enormous amount of welfare, and it hasn't really put them out of poverty. It's just calmed them down a little bit, so they don't.
Maintains the
Yeah,
role.
like you have some black ladies. They have like 10 kids because the more kids they have, and then they purposely divorce. So now the government will give a black lady tremendous amount of welfare benefits. So black men would divorce so the wife could get all this, money from the government. And the more kids she had, the more money she made, you know. And then you see in a black neighborhood, a woman has like 10 kids and no husband. The husband is still there, but they purposely got a divorce, so that she could get all that welfare. And what happened? It just made everything even worse because now you have a whole bunch of kids that are not being educated properly, you know? and and when they grow up, they become angry, and then they started fighting, in the streets with guns in the 1960s, 1968. It was like a revolution taking place. And the revolution was put down, violently. It was called the Black Panthers. Panthers is a like a not a lion, but it's like a wild cat. And they had the Black Panther movement that was seriously put down by the army, not the army, but the militias, American, state militias. They fought them with guns, and there was fighting going on in the streets. I remember that time. There was fighting going on in the black neighborhoods. It happened at the Armenian church was in a black neighborhood, and it was dangerous to go in that neighborhood for some time, because that was in uh, Columbia Avenue. The church was like 1 block away from this Columbia Avenue. That was where the revolution was going on. So it was dangerous to go to the church. And for a short period, it didn't last long because there was fighting in the streets, and they basically killed a lot of the Panthers. You see, there's been a lot of turmoil in the United States, a lot. And then they put in a lot of social programs in the government so that people would not revolt. So then they started Social Security and all kinds of kind of socialist programs, uh, and they're still going on today. Haribol, all glories to Prabhupada. So the U.S. government is a mixture. It's not completely uh, capitalist. It's a mixture of capitalism and socialism. The government gives away a lot of free money to people, so they won't revolt. They have all these different programs. No, that's good in a sense. But it's not really good, because most of that money goes for drugs, and liquor and things like that. And, of course, it stops them from revolting, but there's still a lot of violence in poor neighborhoods, and a lot of kids not getting good education. The schools are not good, and they grow up and they become criminals, and mostly in the black neighborhoods. Some whites also, and they haven't really solved that problem. It's muted. It's not as bad maybe as before, but it's still there. Okay, and the reason why Martin Luther King was assassinated was he made the mistake of after you know getting a lot of freedom for the blacks. Then he started to try and help the poor whites, and then he became against the uh, war uh, against what communists, and that's when uh, he was assassinated. If he didn't, if he didn't start trying to help poor white people and be against the army and war that was taking place, he would not have been assassinated. But as soon as after somewhat emancipating the black people, now he started working with poor whites and the army. That's when he was assassinated. Yeah, he was assassinated, and Kennedy was assassinated, and the Kennedy brothers, both of them were